Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. Anytime they do a poll on this, it comes back as one of the top three, usually the top two, most unnerving, scariest things you can do in life. And I'm talking about public speaking. Most of us have an aversion to that. We're not comfortable when we know that we have to speak in front of people in a live situation. But now, since COVID, many of us are doing Zoom videos, Zoom meetings, and addressing a team of people, and we're still very uncomfortable. We're going to work on that today, give you some great suggestions. And what's going to make today a little bit different is that I'm going to use a cliche, it's all in your head, because we're going to get into a little bit of the psychology behind what we're all thinking when we're faced with having to do a public speaking situation or project. She is somebody that works with people all the time, gets inside their heads and moves them forward. And she's with a great company called Effective Presentations. Jessica Orchin joins us today on the program. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Steve, how are you doing today?
Awesome. Yeah. I'm even with our brief conversation before we started, I'm very excited to learn more about this, what people are thinking, why. I get it. It's kind of scary when you have to present in front of somebody, but why do you think people run from it? What do you think's going on in our minds that is so scary about this?
I think the bottom line is fear of judgment. That the number one thing that people are subconsciously or consciously thinking about when they're public speaking is this fear of not being accepted by others.
Yeah, it's real because if you talk to any therapist, most of us, if not all of us, feel that we're not good enough in
Yeah.
some regard. And it could be just in general, it can be in one, maybe one area, relationships. I'm not good enough. You may not verbalize it, you may not consciously think it, but subconsciously it's sitting in there. And I agree with you. I think we feel that we're not good enough to get somebody's attention and provide them with information. So what do you feel is the first step to getting over that?
I think the first step is recognizing it. And I love what you're describing there because what that is imposter syndrome. And once you can reconcile, hey, I have this element of imposter syndrome, whether it's in your interpersonal relationships or your work life, or just the way you show up in spaces, to recognize, hey, I don't always feel like I'm worthy of having this seat at this table. That's huge.
Mm,
And then recognizing that most people feel this way, which is
yeah.
crazy. I work with executives of amazing companies around the country that you would think would be the most confident people in the world, and they still say, I feel like a fraud.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
And imposter syndrome is big now, for a lot of people. And to your point, I've worked with, I have a marketing company, so we occasionally do video, and there's been situations where we're going to do a video on the top doc in the practice. And, he brings it. He's all good. Camera goes on, the mic is in front of him. He's lost. He doesn't, he knows his stuff, but he just doesn't even know how to look at the camera or feel comfortable. And I don't think he has imposter syndrome. He's just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And isn't it interesting, Jessica, that when when we are delivering something, 99% of the time we know our stuff,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. And that's the problem is the way in which we present it ends up sabotaging that message.
Yeah.
And whether that's conscious or unconscious, we do things to self-soothe those nerves. And I believe the nerves deserve to be in your presentations because the nerves mean that you care.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it just gives you it kind of juices you up. If we didn't
Yeah.
have any emotion, we'd be a flat line. Yeah, here's the facts. There's no there's nothing going on there. So self-sabotaging, what are we doing during these presentations that we're kind of derailing what we're doing?
It's largely physical. And so it typically starts with the breath. People forget to breathe
Mm.
before presentations, and it becomes this vicious cycle and this self-fulfilling prophecy of, oh, I'm nervous, and I feel those symptoms of that heart racing, sweating, shortness of breath. And rather than addressing it at the root of breathing, you end up just pushing through and you hear the voice cracks and the inflections that don't sound so confident. And then we start doing things with our body to soothe ourselves as well. I'm a jeweler. If I'm nervous, I'll play with my jewelry. People put their hands in their pockets and they shift
Mm.
from side to side. We cross our arms. We do all these things that are comfortable to us. But the problem is what's comfortable is often not perceived as available.
Mm. Interesting. You're bringing back memories because back in the day, I've been doing radio, by the way, since I was 17, like literally first paycheck, haven't stopped. But I remember when I was about maybe 5 years into it, whenever I would be on mic, not in front of other people, just in a studio by myself, I was a I was a rubber, if I can say that like that. I would go like this every time I would talk. I would do, and this would be, I guess it's almost like soothing the baby. I'm just,
Yeah.
I would do this, but unfortunately, doing this doesn't allow me to touch controls and do other stuff. Got past that for sure, but I didn't remember that until you said that. And yeah, I don't wear any rings at this time, but I remember what you just said, being a jeweler. It's so funny.
It is. And the problem with that is that suddenly your mind is telling your body, oh, I'm nervous. And I'm doing that thing that I do when I'm nervous. And now your body is telling your mind he's nervous. He's doing that thing he does when he's nervous.
Hmm.
And that's how you get into what I call that vicious cycle,
Yep.
where it's just getting bigger and worse. And the reality is that you just need to calm yourself down and release and have a confident stance in order to connect that mind body to say, I'm okay, I'm safe, I've got this.
Let's go back to breathing because it's huge and so many people don't realize how important, obviously we need to breathe, but how important it is to us to breathe properly and even just in any situation, taking 3 deep breaths intentionally. What that does, I call it the reset button. It resets
Mhm.
your parasympathetic nerve system. That goes a little deep for me. I just know it works.
Yeah.
Share with us.
Well, most people don't do it. They don't take the time to do it. And I'm actually going to reference one of my favorite self-development books or professional development books, which is called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And so when we talk about breathing, it's obvious. You breathe, it helps you, it's good for you. But most people don't do this. Now, the reason I'm bringing up this book is what I took as being the key takeaway from the slight edge is that the slight edge is the difference between what makes 1% of people successful in reaching their goals and 99% of people unsuccessful. And
Mm.
what he defines that slight edge as is the things that are easy to do, but easier not to do. It is easy to take 3 deep breaths before your presentation, or to do some breath work in the morning, or to take a pause in your presentation
Mm.
and reset. It's easier not to do. And so most people are not going to do this because it seems too simple.
Right there. I was waiting for you to say that. It just seemed, how is that going to make a really? Come on. I'm freaking
Yeah.
out over here. I got all this to deliver and say. I I'm a ball of nerves. Yes, it scientifically proven those 3 deep breaths. It's amazing the difference it makes. And I forget sometimes, when I'm in a situation and it's like, duh, stop, and take the breaths. It's going to calm you down. It is truly like Control Alt Delete on your computer, the reset of your system. And not like you said, the number one thing is the breathing. because we can hear it. And then it's almost like you're treading water. Now you've been doing it for an hour and I'm just trying to catch up. But what happens? Your voice sounds different. Your voice cracks. You
Mhm.
running out of breath as you're trying to present. I totally agree with you. Number one, breathe.
Yeah. And you have to kind of reconcile those really big emotions that come up. And what I mean by that is I used to struggle a lot with anxiety. And I can recall being in a panic attack and somebody saying, just breathe. And you think, oh, I'm breathing. You get
Yeah.
so worked up.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm breathing. I'm still alive. What are you talking about?
Right.
But really, it's the only way to strip it back and calm down. And I think the problem is when we get panicked, our brain isn't working properly. We're not thinking straight. We're not able to talk ourselves off the ledge at that point. And so that reconciliation of those feelings really is just saying, hey, I'm not dying. I'm okay. I can take this moment for myself. And I should take this moment. I deserve to take this moment, calm things down, and reset. The other problem with this is that with that fear of judgment that I talked about earlier, we forget that we are allowed to take a couple breaths in a presentation.
Yeah.
We think if I take a moment, everybody's going to think I don't know what I'm talking about. Everybody is going to be judging me. They're going to be staring at me. And so I just need to keep going, 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 going. And we overwhelm ourselves and we overwhelm our audience. 1 second.
You're right. Notice what I just did there?
Yeah, you paused. 1 second as a presenter feels like 10
Yes,
minutes.
it does. It does.
But
And
it's
we minimize the power of the pause.
yeah.
And aren't we doing justice to the listener by pausing a little bit because it allows them to process what we're talking about as opposed to rapid fire. I got to talk really fast and I don't even realize how fast I'm talking. Now I'm out of breath because I'm trying to deliver this information because I want to seem like I'm very credible. You'll take time. It's okay. It's
Yeah,
fun. People will respect you even more just by pausing.
absolutely. And the really cool added benefit of pausing is it actually comes across as really confident.
Mm,
And the more confidence you can display, the more people trust you and believe that you have this credibility. When you think about the best public speakers in the world, typically what they have mastered is the power of pause. And in that pause, guess what they're doing?
gathering
They're
their thoughts.
breathing.
They're thinking of what they're going to say. And politicians, very effective. It's almost as if they deliver a piece of information, talking in a sound bite. I'm going to say this right now. And another thing you need to remember, they've mastered it. You're 100% right there. Yeah. Do you remember going back before? Now, this is what you do when you teach people how to do this. But do you remember the feeling you had before you were confident, before you mastered a lot of this versus what it feels like now?
Yeah,
Big difference, right?
it's a big difference. And again, I want to link back to that imposter syndrome and this confidence piece because the beautiful thing about public speaking and the skills that go along with it is that it's skill based. Yes, there are some kids that are more outgoing naturally when they're younger, and they get more reps in to develop that skill.
Mm.
But anybody can learn to become an effective communicator and a better public speaker. The more you lean into the skills and the more you practice them one at a time, the more effective you become in everything because our world is all communication based. And especially in a world where we are doom scrolling on our phones and fighting for people's attention spans. Nowadays, we're in an attention economy. And the better a communicator you are, the more easily you're going to be able to capture people's attention and effectively get them to buy into you and whatever your message is.
How about relatability? I've always believed that you need to be relatable to the audience. Now, granted, we're going to talk about freebostatic converters today with an added sprangulator connected to it. If the audience doesn't know what that is, you have to find a way to make it relatable.
Mhm.
Maybe that device, I just made that up. I don't even know what that is. Maybe that helps your car economize fuel.
Mhm.
And we can all relate to the price of gas now, but finding that common thread, I was at a networking event. I stopped networking during COVID just because there wasn't a lot going on, obviously. And I got back into it a couple of weeks ago. So I went and, it's been a while. So I'm like, hmm, had a little butterfly for a second, because now I got 30 seconds. I'm up there talking about, my company, what I do. But it struck me that it was at 7 a.m. in the morning. Now, I used to do morning radio for decades, got out of it like 4 years ago, sleep a little bit later now. And it's 7 o'clock in the morning. And I just looked at everybody. And, part of my thing is people know me from radio in this area. And I just looked at them. I said, this is what you people do at 7 o'clock in the morning. I was being very honest because I'm out of that world. I don't know. Like there's life at 7 a.m. And it
Mhm.
was relatable. That's how I found a way to relate, but it was genuine. It came from the heart. How do you how do you find ways to keep it relatable when you're going to address somebody?
People are quite selfish. And I mean this in not an unkind way, but people love to talk about themselves. And so the best communicators know how to listen. Once again, we're bringing it back to this power of pause, silence, breathing. It all works together. And so the way that you find relatability with people is by listening to understand, not listening to respond. And you can't do that if you're just talking over one another,
Hmm.
trying to prove who has the best information in the room. You have to be willing to learn in every situation. And when you're willing to learn, you're able to find connection points with people, adapt your storytelling to people, adapt your message in ways that becomes really compelling to those individuals. Because most presenters are trying to be interesting rather than interested in their audience. And that's a huge misstep.
Love that. And it's real. You're being real. In the time we have, how about the other examples of ways that we sabotage ourselves?
Ooh, that's a good one. I believe very strongly in a pregame ritual. If you want to become a phenomenal public speaker, it does not start when the presentation starts. For me, my pregame ritual starts the night before
Hmm.
because I know that I'm pretty useless without sleep. And so I prioritize that. My pregame ritual also means that I set a physical alarm clock. I don't wake up and immediately go on my phone. We talked about that anxiety piece. I find if I start my day checking emails, sitting on my phone, it sets the tone for the day wrong. When I'm going into a public speaking opportunity, I am doing something physically that's getting me and my mind body connection established. For me, that's often dancing to music. And then I'm focusing on that breath. What I would recommend for folks to consider is before those high stress situations, whether it is public speaking or something else that really gets that heart racing, recognize that what you do in that lead up is going to impact the way you perform. And so when you dig into the why do I feel this way? Well, your self-talk really matters during that pregame ritual too. It's a famous Henry Ford quote that my dad used to say to me growing up, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Hmm.
And so one of the biggest tips that I would give to folks about public speaking is whether you think you can do it or whether you think it's going to go well or go poorly, you are going to be correct.
Love that. And thank you for that reminder because I remember that quote from back in the day. And the intention you set, as you said, Jessica, is everything. You
Mhm.
could look at it, I talk in front of this audience. I don't know, like, or you can flip it around and say, I'm really excited. I have this opportunity. I'm going to connect with people. I'm going to share this information that I have and make it a positive thing. Yeah, there's some butterflies there. That's all normal. Um, Final tip. What would you say it should be?
Okay. Just building on that point, then, what I would say is that energy is really contagious to people. If you go up and you mess up and you are embarrassed, a lot of your audience is going to get secondhand embarrassed. If
Mm,
you go up and say, I'm going to have a good time today, if you change the way you talk to yourself and say, I don't have to give this presentation today, I get to give this presentation today. And that heart racing, those nerves that I feel is excitement because I have something to lose. What I would say, my final tip is pressure is a privilege. It's allowed to be heavy, but recognize that oftentimes that pressure is the weight of gold that you're carrying. And so lean into your skills, lean into that belief in yourself, and you will become a better communicator.
love it. Believe in yourself because you're delivering something for a reason. What's the reason? Somebody asked you to because they
Mhm.
respect what you do, because
Yeah.
you know your stuff. That's why we're talking to you today. It's the same exact thing. What's the best way to find you if somebody wants to engage you, learn how to more effectively deliver presentations? How do they do that?
You could reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Jessica Orchin on LinkedIn. Connect, and I'm happy to chat all things communication.
I'm going to ask you one final question because I'm very curious.
Yeah.
Why did you go down this road in terms of a career path? Because it's very unique.
Thank you. How much time do we have is the better question for me to get back.
Take what you need.
I would say that my first love was performance. For me as a kid, when I discovered theater and performing arts, there was no better feeling than getting on stage.
Hmm.
I did not pursue theater in the traditional realm, but instead I saw every opportunity to get in front of a room as fueling that passion. And so what I was doing before teaching public speaking was teaching business at a university in Canada, at Ivy Business School at Western University. I wanted to try something new. I went on LinkedIn and I found this opportunity. I thought, I love public speaking. I love inspiring people to learn, and I love to travel. Now I get to combine all of those passions and travel around the US, help people overcome their fears, become better communicators, and I get up and put on a show for folks.
Super cool. It sounds like you were the kid that was holding the hairbrush as a microphone back in the day.
Absolutely.
I love it. You have an amazing quality to offer clarity. It's to the point, understandable. You don't take a long time to get to it. I think that's your superpower.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Steve.
I really mean it. It's and your genuineness to help people. It's when they say find your purpose, this seems to be your purpose, and especially with the blend here, with the travel, with your being comfortable being in front of people, putting on a show, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, but you're helping other people put on a show too.
Thanks. Yeah, I
Awesome.
love what I do, and I think that that is such a privilege. And so, my last thing that I would offer to anybody listening to this is you deserve to do work that gets you excited to get out of bed every day, and it's out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.